What's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Mets Daily on the Fan Arch Network. John Saponaro here with you today and every day to talk about our New York Mets. But of course, before we get started, a quick shout out goes to our friends over at Kalshi for sponsoring the video for a limited time. Use the code FANARCHBASEBALL on the Kalshi app to get $10 when you trade 10. And I should mention, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel as we're trying to get to 5,000 subscribers before the end of the 2026 Major League Baseball season. The Mets continue to go on what has been a little bit of a run. It's been impressive, it's been effective, it's been fun to watch. It's been the same things that I've said the last several days, going back to post-deadline, going back to the Guardian series, going back to the Guardian sweep, going back to winning 2 out of 3 from the Pittsburgh Pirates, and all of a sudden, you look up and now the Mets take a nice game from the Atlanta Braves where they set the tone early, they tack on runs when they have to, they pick up their pitcher both with the offense and in the bullpen because Christian Scott, not at his sharpest, goes about 4 innings. It's not the point. What they're doing is putting together really good, really clean baseball, and again, you like to see it. And you could say that the Guardians, hell, I've said it out loud, the Guardians, bit of a paper tiger. The AL Central is never as good as you think it is going to be, so even teams leading that division, you're like, okay, fine. The Pittsburgh Pirates, they were on a bit of a downturn when the Mets got in there. Their offense is taking a hit, their pitching is taking a hit, they're not clicking, they're not firing on all cylinders. Okay. And then you have the Atlanta Braves. The Atlanta Braves last week and the week before that won 8 games in a row, played the Yankees tough, eventually got a game out of that series, even though the Yankees were able to break that losing streak and take 2 of 3. But now you look and the Mets go to a place where they never win, seemingly, and they're able to get a really, really nice victory here, and they're able to win the season series, which we'll talk about in a second. But, I mean, when you look at this game from top to bottom, outside of, again, the starting pitching, which wasn't great out of Christian Scott, but a young pitcher just trying to find his way, when you look at what the Mets were effectively able to accomplish, they played a really nice game. Again, the offense was clicking the way it needed to. Francisco Lindor with another couple hits, another home run. Bo Bichette continues to hit and drive in runs. Jared Young continues to prove that he's a piece. And one guy who I have been down on since the very beginning, not the beginning of the season, the beginning of time, Brett Baty. He hits a big grand slam that was really the tone setter early on, gave the Mets a 5-run lead, a lead that they would come close to giving up, but they would never quite relinquish along the way. So shout out to Brett Baty for doing that. I'm not a fan of Brett Baty's game. I don't like Brett Baty as a baseball player, but he is showing that there is going to be some value in potentially keeping him on the team as a bench piece. My issue with Brett Baty is the overexposure and the overhype of what this guy is and can be. My issue with Brett Baty is not the fact that, okay, yeah, if you put this guy on a major league roster, he could play some third, he could play some second. I don't ever want to see him play the outfield. I don't really want to see him at first, although maybe with some confidence in a full offseason and, kind of working his way into that kind of rotation, he could do better at first. He's been oddly bad at first. First base is quote unquote easier than playing second or third in the major leagues. None of it's easy, but on a sliding scale, it's easier. And he hasn't been able to take to it. It doesn't seem like he's comfortable on that corner as opposed to third base. Whatever. I digress. He deserves a lot of credit for that as well. So does the Mets' new revamped bullpen, and we'll talk about that a lot in the second half of this show. But shout out to Daniel Duarte, who's been electric. Shout out to Nate Lavender, who is good again. And the Mets are just putting together good game after good game after good game. And that leads us to where we are right now, where for the first time since 2017, the Mets win the season series versus the Braves. Even when the Mets are good, the Mets don't play well against the Braves. It doesn't matter if you're a 6-year-old fan, a 60-year-old fan. It doesn't matter. You know that the Mets have trouble with the Braves. You know the Mets have trouble in Atlanta. I don't care if it's Turner Field or Truist Park or anything in between. The Mets just don't play well there, and so it's been very difficult for the Mets to win a season series versus this team. And yet here they are in a season where at one point they were flirting with 100 losses, and I don't think they're going to get close to that now because they're playing so much better baseball. But in a season where it looked like everything was lost and they were the worst team money could buy 2.0, they wind up beating the Braves in the season series. And it just goes to show you that baseball's weird, baseball's quirky, baseball's unpredictable. There is a part of me as a Mets fan who's been a Mets fan my whole life who goes, man, you had to do this in this season. You had to have this good of a run against the Braves in a season where you're probably not going to make the playoffs. And that's frustrating because that would be great. You know, if you're battling the Braves for first place, it would be really great for you to, I don't know, win the season series decisively. But look, maybe this is something the Mets can build off of. When you have young guys who don't really know about the lore and don't really know about the history, the positive, the negative, whatever, they don't buy into it. They just go out there, they play baseball. You have guys, not only young guys, but guys who are fighting for their baseball careers. You've got guys like Nate Lavender, and you've got guys like Daniel Duarte and Kodai Senga to a different degree, and Sean Manaea to a different degree, who are just like, look, man, we're trying to play baseball. You know, Kodai Senga was in danger of being DFA'd at points this season. Sean Manaea in danger of being DFA'd at points this season. Brett Beatty losing prospect status, losing a starting job, maybe gets non-tendered. Like, this is what guys are staring down. Marcus Semien staring down the loss of his baseball career, right? Like he knows he's on the back nine, but he'd like to play it out and go out on his terms. And you see, okay, well, I got to put some stuff together here. I've got to do something. I've got to make something out of this. It's not just the guys who are 23 and 21 years old and 24 years old who are on the ascent. It's the other guys too. They're playing fast, they're playing loose, they're playing effectively, and they're doing what they need to do to win baseball games. And when you put all that together and they play like this, they can beat anybody. And that's proof positive. You know, we talk about the Guardians being soft and the Pirates being banged up and not knowing how to win. The Braves know how to win. The Braves are really good. The Braves have over 70 wins on the season. Feels like the Mets have like 40 less wins than they do. So this was a really, really good statement. And it's something I think the Mets can build off of. Every season is its own ecosystem. Every season changes, the vibes change. But when you're going to have a lot of carryover on the roster, and the Mets will, I think this is something that they can take away. And that's why I never root for losses. It's things like this that I will never root for losses for any of my teams. Now, do you get to a point sometimes where you're okay with losses? Sure. You get to a point where you've just understood that there's going to be more losing than winning, and you accept the losses and you say, hey, you know, if the losses mean that they can get a top 6 pick and it's protected, fine. Or if you're in the NFL and you're like, look, man, my team is terrible and there's 2 games left to play. I don't want them to lose, but if they lose, they get the number 2 overall pick. If they win, they get the number 10 overall pick. That's a big swing. I could stomach a loss. I'm not going to sit there and root for them to lose, but I can stomach it. But that's all this is me deciding that I don't want to sit here and watch games and watch them lose and root for them to lose, which I will never, ever, ever do. Meanwhile, baseball season is here, and now you can trade every game on Kalshi. And you know what I do? I sit down to record the show. Before I hit the record button, I pop on over to the Kalshi app and see what I can find for you that's fun, that's interesting, that has good value, usually related to our New York Mets. And I'm not going to upset the apple cart because I've had some weird picks on here. Last week I said that the under was going to happen. Under for runs scored in a game, under 6.5 for the Mets and the Guardians, I think it was, with Nolan McLean on the mound against Foster Griffin. And the Mets scored 13 and the Guardians scored 5 or 6. So I've had some weird picks. I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to keep it simple because yesterday's plan worked. If you look on Kalshi right now, the Braves are the favorites to win again, just like they were yesterday. But I like the value here because I like Nolan McLean versus Martin Perez. Mets win is trading at 46 cents a share, which means $100 will get you $213. Right now, like I said before, the Mets are playing in a way where they can win and they can beat anyone. So let's keep the good times rolling. I like a Mets win at 46 cents a share. On Kalshi, you're trading against peers on a live market, meaning there is no house, and as the probability changes, you can buy into and out of your position. You already know, but for a limited time, use the code FANARCHBASEBALL on the Kalshi app to get $10 when you trade 10. Kalshi, trade on anything, must be 18 and over. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risks and may not be suitable for all investors. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory. Well, it's not all good in Metsland, or it is good depending on what you feel about this particular player, but I am one person who never roots for injuries, and I don't think any of that is productive or quite frankly nice to do. But Devin Williams, much maligned Mets closer for a lot of the season, has now hit the IL. The Mets are saying that it's not serious. The Mets are saying it's a shoulder strain, and you don't like to hear shoulder strains when you talk about, like Major League Baseball pitchers, because shoulders are worse than elbows. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, but the Mets are saying, maybe they're downplaying it. The Mets are saying it's not a big deal. He was dealing with a little bit of arm fatigue last week, and so maybe the Mets are just being extra cautious. They're saying that he should be able to come off the IL relatively soon and that he's expected to pitch again this season. So I think once we get to that point, we'll know whether or not the Mets were downplaying this or the Mets were just being honest and trying to give a guy a little bit of a break with his arm. You don't like, big picture, Devin Williams is signed for a couple more years here, and you don't like to hear the word shoulder at all. At all. So big picture, I'm worried. Short term, I'm not really worried because it could be a whole lot of nothing, but it does make you raise your eyebrow a little bit. And Devin Williams hasn't been great this season, but I think he's been better than a lot of Mets fans. Mets fans just don't like Devin Williams. They don't like Devin Williams because they saw him fail with the Yankees. They don't like Devin Williams because they think Pete Alonso broke him when he hit that home run off him in 2024 to essentially clinch the postseason series for the New York Mets against the Milwaukee Brewers. I remember that fondly. I was in Australia at the time watching that game at 10 a.m. the following day, technically. And I thought that the Mets season was going to die on a vine right then and there. And then Alonso hit that improbable home run, and Mets obviously advance. And I was giddy, man. I was basically in tears. So I know it well. I understand why Mets fans think Devin Williams isn't that good. But there was a time where Devin Williams was one of the top 3, no worse than top 5 relief pitchers in the entire sport. And I think the underlying metrics when he was bad with the Yankees were still good. The underlying metrics with the Mets have been good. And I think that there's just something a little bit amiss. And again, in what has been a weird and wonky season, I think he's given up 2 grand slams. It might even be 3. It's just a weird situation for Devin Williams. But that said, the Mets need him to rebound. He is right now the one constant, the one known commodity in their bullpen going into 2027. What his role is going to be, who knows? Setup man, closer, we'll see. But I think it's likely to be the closer, at least to start. But anyway, wish Devin Williams the best. Hopefully he heals up quickly. And I think, again, when you're looking at 2027, I want to see Devin Williams back on the field in 2026, pitching effectively, because I'd like to know that he is healthy and the Mets don't need another question mark going into 2027. It's funny because right around the deadline, before they sell off, it seems like the Mets have questions everywhere. And now in this little short sample, as we get from the deadline and we make our way the next couple months to the end of the season, I think some of these things are going to answer themselves, right? We already knew Benj was a player. We already knew Ewing was a player, but it seems likely that Bichette will be here and he'll stay. And all of a sudden the Mets catching tandem is pretty solidified. And then you have guys, kind of picking up slack, and, Jared Young is a piece and he's a player. And, you see in the bullpen that some of these guys like Duarte and probably Dediel Nunez and maybe Nate Lavender, okay, maybe they don't have to rebuild an entire bullpen. They went into this with so many questions, and somehow they sold off 9 players, a third of their roster, and they're starting to get answers for 2027. So with that said, I don't want to open up a can of worms here with Devin Williams. I want him to be a part of the things that you don't have to worry about, and I'd feel a lot better if he gets back onto the field here in 2026. But in the meantime, our final segment, that means that somebody has to close for the New York Mets while Devin Williams is down. And we got the answer very quickly of who that was going to be, because the Mets did have plenty of options. The Mets could have gone with Jeffrey Yan. The Mets could have used Daniel Duarte differently. The Mets could have used Daniel Nunez, but they didn't. They decided to set up the game for Kodai Senga to get the save. So much so that when it looked like the Mets might tack on more runs, and it looked like the Mets had a chance to make this a non-save situation, they had Chase McDermott up alongside Kodai Senga. They were going to go to a different pitcher if this was not a save situation. So when they're talking about leverage and they're talking about, a guy going out there and proving himself in a specific situation, the Mets made good on that promise because they went with Kodai Senga. They did it the first time. There was a whisper. There was a press conference. Andy Green, I think we're going to pitch Kodai Senga in leverage. 2 hours later or whatever it was, Kodai Senga's pitching in leverage. And now Devin Williams goes down and there's this conversation, well, now Kodai Senga can maybe be the closer. A couple hours later, Kodai Senga is the closer. So he looked really good. And again, what I've said on this show about him before has held has held true because his fastball plays up and the ghost fork is wipeout. He gets a couple strikeouts. He does walk a guy, but he gets in and out of that inning so quickly. And I think this might be the most effective thing for Kodai Senga to do. Kodai Senga has said he still wants to be a starter, but he understands why he can't be one right now because he hasn't been good enough to be one. I think, and Ryan Finkelstein said this on Twitter, and I agree, if you put Kodai Senga in a position like this where he is closing out games, not just pitching and leverage, but closing, maybe he falls in love with this. Maybe, and I think Kodai Senga is just quirky enough to really like this. And then look, if Kodai Senga is your closer next year and Devin Williams is your setup man, fine. I don't care where these pieces fit together. There are two guys that are under contract that need to have roles. And do I think it's realistic? Right now, I'm going to fall a little short of that. I don't know that Devin Williams won't be the closer in 2027. All I'm saying is the Mets need to answer questions in the bullpen, and Kodai Senga is helping them answer questions in the bullpen. And like I said before, like I've said a million times on this show, he was in danger of being DFA'd. And if you go from a DFA candidate to a legitimate back end of the bullpen ace, that's a big jump in one season. You got to give Kodai Senga credit if he can pull it off. You got to give the Mets credit for trying it. I think they should have tried it sooner, but I digress. And you have to give Justin Willard and the pitching lab credit for being able to figure it out and maximizing what this guy can do. But 98, 99, 100 miles an hour with a ghost fork that is still graded out as one of the best pitches in the sport, that's going to play. It's going to play in the 7th, it's going to play in the 8th, and it will certainly play in the 9th inning. That's going to do it for this episode of Mets Daily. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel as we're sitting at just over 4,000 subscribers, trying to get to 5,000 before the end of the season. We would love to do it, but more importantly, we would love for you to be a part of the community. Until next time, I'm John Saponaro. See you tomorrow.